Hey everybody, and welcome back to World of Warships Legends. We're playing on the PlayStation 4, and today we'll be looking at the Admiral Graf Spee, the Tier 5 premium German cruiser. First, let's start out with a little bit of history. The Admiral Graf Spee was the last Deutschland-class Panzerschiff, a class of ship that obviously Germany was very proud of at the time since they named the first ship after the country itself. That said, Germany fell into the same sort of trap that every other nation that names ships after the nation itself falls into, the fear of ever seriously committing her to battle. Obviously, because if you sink the USS United States of America, or HMS Great Britain, you can kind of imagine what the headlines are going to be the next day in the newspapers. But the Germans cleverly renamed her during the war to the Lutzow. All three ships were lost during the war, though the Lutzow was salvaged by the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and used for weapons testing until 1947. Graf Spee is by far the most famous of the three Panzerschiffe. Maximilian Johannes Maria Hubert Reichsgraf von Spee, considered to be a tenacious commander, particularly by Germans in the interwar period, who famously led the East Asian Squadron in commerce raiding and into battle during the First World War. By some fate, the ship named in his honor left Germany prior to the outbreak of hostilities during World War II, and just like the Admiral, would never return again. Graf Spee was famous for being supposedly faster than any ship that could sink her, and could defeat any ship that could catch her. The ship enjoyed some notable successes in commerce raiding during the opening part of World War II. Considering the great distance that it was from Germany, its commander, Hans Langsdorff, was ordered not to engage any ship that could pose a credible threat to him. Essentially because if the ship was damaged, there were few options for Germany to repair her, and it was more important for her to continue disrupting Allied trade. In all, 8 small fleets were put together to hunt the Graf Spee. One of these eventually caught up with the ship. Captain Langsdorff ordered the Graf Spee to attack, only to realize he was up against more ships than he'd bargained for. Still, since the ship's engines were badly in need of repair, and the Royal Navy cruisers he was up against were probably going to be faster than him at that point, he decided to engage the ships anyway. The Graf Spee largely managed to cripple HMS Exeter, as well as several light cruisers supporting her. The badly damaged ship was able to score a critical blow to the ship, destroying Graf Spee's fuel processing plant and desalination plant. Captain Langsdorff decided to withdraw to Argentina, which was a neutral country where he was allowed to stay up to 3 days. During this time, the British managed to funnel false intelligence to the Germans, convincing them that a fleet was coming to sink the Graf Spee, including aircraft carrier Ark Royal and battlecruiser Renown. Rather than seeing the ship fall into enemy hands, Langsdorff sailed his ship out of the River Plate and scuttled her. As far as how to play the ship in the game, I'll start by saying I like this ship. Let me just repeat that. I like this ship, but I also like the Aufklärungspanzer Panther and Dark Souls. So I'm going to have to take you on a little voyage through imagination and imagery, because I really have no idea what to compare this ship to, other than maybe a KV-2 if it was a ship with a spotter plane and torpedoes. The Graf Spee is truly the Swiss Army knife of World of Warships. You have a lot of tools, and just like some random person who wanders into the wilderness, you feel pretty confident that you've got everything that you need to survive. Of course, you do have everything that you need, but everyone who's ever needed a knife and only had a Swiss Army knife can tell you, just like everyone who's ever needed a pair of scissors and only had Swiss Army knife scissors, and just like anyone who's ever needed a wine bottle opener in the middle of a forest and only had a Swiss Army knife wine bottle opener in the middle of a forest can tell you, you'd rather have the real thing. Graf Spee is just as overtooled for whatever you want to do with it as it is incapable of doing whatever that thing is truly well. The reason why I say this, the Graf Spee has these big, beautiful 11-inch guns, basically the same idea as the Scharnhorst, which is a tier 6 battleship. And you've got to think, this is just amazing. And it can be amazing as long as you're fighting mostly cruisers. Then you see a destroyer and you think, I've got this. But you quickly realize that shooting a spider isn't as easy from far away. What is worse is that the spider is riding a pile of torpedoes. And though you'd be fairly small for a battleship, the Graf Spee doesn't turn like a cruiser. It doesn't really even turn like the Scharnhorst. You're heavy in the water and your guns have all the unbridled accuracy of a gunslinger, fanning his pistol from the hip. If you do manage to survive that, you do have a heal, and having a heal is great. But you do have cruiser armor and cruiser hit points, so if you're expecting this to be some sort of so-called pocket battleship, you're probably going to find this somewhat underwhelming. You have sonar, and it's really good sonar. It's German sonar that can detect a ship further than any other sonar in the game. But, like I said, you're also not that agile, so the things you're going to want to be hunting with that sonar, you might not actually be all that good handling by yourself. You have a spotter plane, and actually there's really nothing you can complain about with the spotter plane. It's a cruiser spotter plane, so it lasts 6 minutes, and it's great. It's just great. As we get into the stats, we'll start like normal with survivability. In terms of survivability, the Graf Spee is really pretty good. For hit points, you're going to end up with about 20% more than the next cruiser. You do have, at least where it counts, about 60 millimeters of extra armor. If you were to compare this to a battleship, though, you would find all of these numbers fairly low. For artillery, I can't really compare this to any other ship other than saying that the Graf Spee has the largest guns of any cruiser in the entire game. It has the same caliber gun as the Scharnhorst, like I mentioned earlier, which is, of course, the smallest caliber that is available to any battleship. This means that the Graf Spee has the ability to delete cruisers like a battleship, kind of, and it actually does do more damage typically with its AP shells than even the Scharnhorst itself, but it does also have German battleship accuracy. You do have only 2 turrets, one forward and one aft, and that means that there are a lot of situations where you might only be able to get one gun turret to bear on your enemy. That means you're shooting with only 3 guns that are inconsistent, let's just say. And so sometimes you end up with a big load of nothing, and that's something that if you're considering the Graf Spee, you do want to kind of think in the back of your head, am I willing to take that risk? If you are, like, sometimes you come up with great results. If you're not, be assured that plenty of times the Graf Spee comes up with nothing. You have an interesting set of torpedoes. You have one quadruple launcher on each side. They actually shoot out to 8 kilometers, which is actually about 2 kilometers further than German torpedoes go on cruisers. They do have those excellent German arcs, so you can fire significantly forward and even better to the rear of the ship, but they do have a fairly long reload at 90 seconds. At least 90 seconds is long for German reloads. For AA, not that it matters, the Graf Spee is pretty much in the middle of the pack. It is better than the Nürnberg. It's about equally rated to the Aoba and worse than the Pensacola. When we look at maneuverability, this is kind of where the Graf Spee really suffers because the rudder shift time here is, as far as I can tell, probably the worst rudder shift time for any cruiser in the game right now. And it doesn't exactly make up for this by also having the slowest speed. And then as we round out the stats with concealment, the Graf Spee is the most visible cruiser in the game right now, at tier 5. So before we really get into this battle, though I don't normally do this in my ship reviews, I'm going to point out I will be using Gunther Lütjens. The reason for this is because of this one skill, Sponge. With only 2 gun turrets, having one of your gun turrets, or God forbid both of them, disabled is pretty crippling. So essentially what I've done here is I've taken Gunther Lütjens because he will help me take less damage, and he will also help increase the amount of hit points that I have on each one of my turrets. So now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the actual battle. As usual, I have chosen this battle not because it is exceptional by any means, but because it shows off the Graf Spee's strengths and some of its weaknesses. Probably the best of any game that I've played so far this week. So here we are on New Dawn. I am starting out with the intent to go towards the middle. Now what I like to do, particularly with this ship, is to play a sort of high-risk game with islands. If I can keep track of where the destroyers are, I should be able to have a pretty decent game. Destroyers are terrifying in this ship, particularly if they're fairly close to you, so, you know, islands, they pose some challenges. That said, what you do not want to do is get into one of these long-range gun engagements, at least in my experience with the Graf Spee, because you will probably not fare all that well. You do not have the firepower to really go toe-to-toe with a battleship, and you definitely do not have the accuracy to outgun most cruisers at range. So now you see we're picking up this Iron Duke. I am shooting AP. I have found that AP actually isn't all that effective against battleships unless you can really kind of aim for their upper belt. We're a little far away to do this. I was testing to see whether or not I could get some plunging fire on that Iron Duke. I haven't gotten a Citadel on a battleship with this kind of gameplay yet, so I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's not real likely. We do get in some nice hits on that Congo. You will find you get really, really wildly random sort of damage rolls out of this. That can be really, really good, and that can be really, really bad. This is kind of why I made that joke about the KV-2, because essentially you're hoping for the RNG to be on your side when you're playing the Graf Spee, particularly when it comes to accuracy. Now those shots look pretty good. We score several hits and actually score a pretty big chunk of damage there. No Citadels again, and like I said, you're probably not going to see very many Citadels in this ship while playing against battleships. With battleships, it's not necessarily a bad idea to shoot AP at them. I shoot a lot more AP in this than I do on the Scharnhorst, even though they have roughly the same guns. That's basically because I'm down a tier, and because it doesn't hurt me as much. There aren't as many things that can straight up shatter or bounce my shells. So I'm back on that AP. I'm looking at that Königsberg. I'm thinking, you know, hopefully I get lucky. I have found German turtleback armor, even on these cruisers, to be fairly effective at repelling these 11-inch guns. And of course, it doesn't help when I straight up miss with most of that stuff. And as you saw, those weren't exactly bad shots. Placed just above the waterline. We only score 1 of 6 hits. I would be real surprised if too many of those hit. And wouldn't you know, one of them does. And Citadel's a person too. So, like, this is kind of the life of the Graf Spee. You're really hoping for those lucky shots. I am starting to realize I might be out of position, so I'm actually going to start turning around here. I'm trying not to play this like the Scharnhorst, even though I really, really want to. It just cannot compete with that level of aggression that you can get in the Scharnhorst. What you're going for here is the peek-a-boom. You jump out from behind an island or something and just delete something at hopefully medium range, and hopefully also stay kind of out of the priority target of these battleships. We shoot some shells there. 4 penetrations, another pretty fantastic result. And as you can see, even without citadels, you can get some nice damage results with this ship. That said, there are going to be some games that you play where you spend, 3, 4, 5 reloads trying to just deal with one cruiser because you just cannot manage to land the shots. And then in other cases, you'll get kind of what I just showed you in terms of damage against battleships. And so far, we haven't seen what it's like to go up against a destroyer, but trust me, all in good time. All in good time. So now we don't feel quite as out of place, even though we're in roughly the same place. We are up 2 ships from the enemy, so we're feeling a little bit emboldened by our numbers advantage. We see an Iron Duke way out there. He's probably not going to be able to shoot at me because of that island. They tend to get in the way. We do have this Aoba and a Königsberg. I'm going to start in on the Königsberg, even though it's presenting a better angle to me, just because he's low on hit points. If I take him out of the game, that means there are less shells to be shot back at me. And he's low enough that I feel like if I just get decent hits in on his superstructure, and if I can manage to penetrate his bow, we'll finish him off just like that. For a moment there, you saw the brief view of what the torpedo arcs are. They are very, very good. Unfortunately, this is one of my early games, so I'm still kind of getting used to, how does this ship feel? Now, at this range, the sort of catastrophic damage that you can put in on cruisers is pretty intense. You saw 2 massive hits on that Aoba, and you can also see me struggling to turn my ship and slow it down enough to miss those torpedoes. I don't quite get all the way there. I do launch some torpedoes with, out a lot of effect there. This should kind of disrupt how he wants to maneuver. I think I've got him whether or not these shells hit. And they do hit, so there you go. We got 2 ships left, and at this point we are sailing towards that enemy base. It looks like the Iron Duke is way over there, and the last time we saw their destroyer, it was even further away than that. Unfortunately, I'm going to learn all too quickly that ships can move against me in this game. And we have been spotted, which is curious. I start looking around, and I start turning into the base because I think I need to start maneuvering if I've been spotted, and I don't know where it's from. I'm going to probably empty these shots with my guns. I should be thinking about switching over to HE, because if I've been spotted, it was because of this destroyer. Now my initial instinct would be to charge. I do have hydroacoustic search, but it's on recharge. Now, TacticAngel, what do you want to do next? Well, this is probably not real good for me, so I'm going to start trying to heal myself in case I manage to eat a torpedo or 2. Uh-oh. So, here we go. This is one of the nice times to be a cruiser and to be a little bit shorter than some of the battleships in the game, even with these battleship guns. We turn around, we shoot again. We got 6 shells out there. They're relatively well aimed, and I get nothing. You will end up with a lot of that, honestly. So I'm really, really hoping that somebody comes and tries to help me with this. There are times that you are not as vulnerable to destroyers, and that's just, once again, the RNG. Do you manage to hit the darn thing? There I land one small hit, 528 damage. That's not going to be enough to really do much about it, but somebody else takes him out, and I do the polite thing and thank him for it. In any case, this game is pretty well won. We will go ahead and speed towards the end. And here we have our results. Obviously, victory. We did almost 70,000 damage, earning us 300,000 units. That is because of the flags and other stuff that I have on the ship right now. 3,500 experience. There you see us on the top of the list. Not a fantastic result, but once again, this is mostly to show you exactly what this ship is capable of. I hope you found this review informative, and I'll see you guys on the next one.